So we're here today with AJ Bywater, who is here to talk about his first novel, BitBob Artificial Earth. AJ, over to you.
Hey Florence, it's lovely to be here. Excited to talk to you today, thank you.
So AJ, tell us a bit about yourself. What has your journey been as a writer?
Okay, so hey, we're on AJ Bywater. It's actually my pen name, so my real name's Alistair. AJ is my initials, Bywater's my mum's maiden name. I work in the health tech world, so I work for a specialist cancer hospital here in Manchester where we're filming today, called the Christie, and I live in Huddersfield. So, and actually the Manchester and Huddersfield aesthetic appears in the book. So for those who know the area, keep a lookout for some of those locations. There's a bit of a feel there. So yeah, that's me.
So why BitBob Artificial Earth? What kind of inspired you to write the story?
Yeah, good question. So the inspiration came from an unlikely source, or probably is. I was at a conference and there was a keynote speaker, and it was actually the guy that won Britain's Got Talent, the soldier who did magic tricks. So as well as doing some cool magic tricks at this conference, he talked about his goals and having his Leona Lewis moment and reaching for the stars and stretching yourself. And it just really inspired me to start to write the story that I had in my head. I had no idea that I could write or that it was the thing I wanted to do, but I just sat down and started to write and tried to do it. And I very quickly found the process really cathartic, really kind of inspirational, and just really enjoyed getting the characters and the world down on the page. So yeah, it was from there really, kind of a moment in time in life that just kind of made me start writing and ended up writing a book.
So what was your writing process? Was there any sort of particular ritual you had prior to writing? Was there any kind of thing that you did on a regular basis?
Yeah, so unlike kind of some authors who seem to write on a beach or at the top of a mountain or some kind of Instagrammable moment, mine wasn't quite as glamorous. It was always after I'd had a bath on an evening, sat at the kitchen table with some nice music playing in the background, some classical music or just something really chilled out. And I'd sit and write for an hour and a half. And yeah, I just found it a really good way of relaxing on an evening. And it's really important. So if you're an aspiring writer out there, just try and write every day. So that's what I did. Even if it was just a few sentences would be all I would write some evenings. And then whole chapters would be things I'd write other evenings. And it's just getting into that kind of rhythm of writing and not being tough on yourself for not writing 1,000 words a day or whatever. Just kind of keep the writing process going. So yeah, just sat chilling at my kitchen table was basically my kind of writing nook.
It sounds like that consistency just sort of helps you get it all together quite a lot. So with that as well, how would you recommend sort of writers that are struggling to find an end to their story and the story is like developing rapidly, but there's just the struggle to find an ending? How would you advise kind of creating an ending to this fantastic story?
Yeah, so I had a lot of the story structure in my head to start with, but some of it just came out on the page as I was writing. But I found a lot of tools and a lot of techniques as I was going along that really helped. So one I would recommend is a book called Save the Cat Writes a Novel. It gives you the typical 3-act structure to a book, so start, middle and end, but it has all these beats, all these things that you want to hit as you're kind of going along. And has some really good advice about how you should start and finish a book. So I used that framework to make sure that I'd mapped my book out in a really in a way that readers would enjoy and understand. So yeah, I'd recommend that definitely.
So who's going to love BitBob Artificial Earth? Who should read it?
So the book is aimed at people who enjoy fantasy fiction adventures. So it could be young adult readers who are getting into chapter books, or it could be somebody who's exploring the sci-fi and fantasy genre, loves the genres, but fancies something a little bit different, because I like to think it's a bit different to your kind of typical fantasy or sci-fi adventures. Or somebody who just wants a bit of a cool down from their spicy dark romance books that I see all over TikTok. That might be, maybe they might kind of want to read it as well. If there's any kind of parents out there that are wondering if it's okay for children, then I think if it was a movie, it'd be like a 12A. So if you'd let them watch, say, a superhero adventure movie that was a 12A, then BitBob's going to be totally fine for them, as long as they're kind of okay reading chapter books. Knock yourselves out, it's completely fine. And then upper age limit, there isn't one. I think if you were a 304-year-old alien who's in a spaceship circulating Earth and want to read it, that's totally cool. You'll love it. You might recognise some of your friends in there, who knows.
So why should BitBob Artificial Earth be on someone's to be read list?
So I think it would sit well on somebody's TBR if they're into sci-fi and fantasy, if they like a good adventure book. I mentioned earlier if it's a genre that you're trying to get into, I think this would be a really good book to have on your TBR, because it straddles between sci-fi and fantasy, but at the heart of it is just a really good story, a really good kind of view into humanity and who we are, set in a mad Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz type crazy world. So I think it should be on your TBR if you love sci-fi and fantasy, if you want to get into sci-fi and fantasy, or if you just want to try something a bit different that's maybe a bit out of the genre that you usually read with him.
So is there a particular scene when you were writing that stood out to you? And do you remember what you were doing whilst you were writing that scene?
Sure, yeah. So it's a chapter. So the chapter that stands out to me the most was a chapter called The School. So Bob and his friend are being chased through this typical English British comprehensive school by a nightmarish creature. So it's really suspenseful and kind of scary in places. And I just loved writing it. I wrote the whole chapter in one sitting, so that's why it stands out to me. I just kind of loved the process of writing that scene and that chapter. The School stands out to me as the kind of most memorable one. And interestingly, the chapter afterwards was the hardest to write, because I'd just gone on this kind of really emotional roller coaster of writing that chapter. It was difficult then to kind of pick back up and go into the next chapter. So yeah, that stands out to me.
So when you were writing the book, were there any elements you borrowed from sort of other places, other works of fiction, or even people in your life or things in your life?
Yeah, sure. So I drew inspiration from all over the place, really. I'm a big nerd, so I love everything kind of sci-fi and fantasy anyway. I grew up reading things like The Faraway Tree. If nobody's out there's read that, read it. It's just amazing, kind of full of fantastical adventures. But Brandon Sanderson, Philip Pullman, Tolkien, all those kinds of authors just really kind of my go-to fantasy fiction adventures. But I draw a lot of inspiration from other places as well. I love music, and actually sometimes I'll be listening to a song and imagining my characters and the worlds and what they're doing, and that will turn into ideas for chapters. So music's a big influence on me and my life generally. But I've also picked up inspiration. So there's a cute little dog in the book called Bite. It's palm-sized little white dog with a glittery ear. It's super cute. You want a plushie. We've already discussed this. Florence wants a plushie, so I'm going to have to do that now. We're going to have to get the plushie Bites. And he was inspired by this tiny little character dog that we've got on our window ledge at home behind the sink. That's the snow dog, so the dog from The Snowman. You know, the Aled Jones were walking in the air, flying snowman thing. And I will just pick these things up, and all of a sudden they'll get turned into some inspiration for the book. So, I guess the answer is lots of places, lots of inspiration out there in the world.
What inspired you to create Bob as a protagonist?
So Bob has kind of flavours of what I was like as a teenager. He's really introverted, mop of unruly brown curls. That sounds familiar. Not exactly like me, but there's a lot of that in there. But as a protagonist, he needed to be in a very juxtaposition with the rest of the world. So he's really introverted, freezes on the spot, is really unsure about who he is and what he's doing, which is very different to everybody else and everything else he meets, which there's a level of certainty and action and taking definite steps towards something, which he's the opposite of. And then maybe he kind of discovers a bit about who he could be and who the potential of who he could be towards the end. So yeah, partially inspired by the teenage me, I think.
Oh, I think it's lovely to hear when you've sort of taken elements from your real life and your own life experiences, because it makes it that much more real when you put it on paper as well.
Yeah, so I think the book is actually, like I imagine with all writers, it's a bit of a love story to all the things I love in life. It's full of nerdy things. It's full of the things that I've loved from science fiction and fantasy, and the things that inspire me, my family. My wife's a nurse. One of the main characters is a nurse. So there's all those kinds of elements that really make up the whole story. So I'm really proud of the book because it really feels like a part of me and part of who I am in there as well.
So with the main characters you've created in this fantastic world, if you could meet any one of them, who would it be and why?
So I think I would meet Titch. So Titch is from a race called the Builders. They're giants who wear golden armor and like skull-like masks and can smash their way through hex beasts like there's no tomorrow. But actually he's a really jovial, really nice character, just a super cool guy. So I just want a couple of beers with Titch, hang out, talk about music, maybe learn some dance moves from him because he's a cool dancer and I'm not. So I think that would be pretty awesome. So I'm going to say Titch. That's my answer. Yeah, I want to hang out with Titch.
Can you give an example of a piece of sort of backstory or maybe an extra part of the story which you might have removed in order to make room for the rest of everything else that you've written in this incredible book of yours?
Yeah. So one of my top tips for writing is to write fast, edit slow. So just kind of go with the creative flow as it's going. Don't worry too much about the perfection of each sentence and each word. And there's the odd section I kind of edited out, but nothing that fundamentally changed the flow of the story. But just to give you an idea of how extensive the editing process is, I think when I finished the book, it was 93,000 words. And by the time I'd finished editing, it was 88,000 words. Wow. Yeah, but so to cut out about 5,000 words, but without changing the flow of the story at all. It was just kind of extraneous editing. So yeah, nothing that I completely pulled out when cut, / gone. But there is an awful lot of editing goes on when you've finished writing.
So you've just dropped a kind of really useful little nugget of information and kind of wisdom for other writers. So. Have you got any other sort of wisdom you can share with new and upcoming writers?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the process of writing, but not a writer. Like I said earlier, I feel like a storyteller, like I'm telling a story. So I think it's important to enjoy your writing, write a little bit every day. When you're editing, I'd recommend reading aloud. I found that really, really useful. So I call it the Stephen Fry test. So it could be Stephen Fry, it could be Snoop Dogg, whoever you want to kind of have in your head as kind of reading the words when you're reading it out loud. But if it can't be read out loud, then you need to work on it. It needs to kind of sound like it could be read out. So imagine Stephen Fry's reading your audiobook. Does it sound good? So yeah, definitely. Reading out loud, top tip. Top tip number 2, we're doing well. Let's see how many we can get to at the end of this.
And with the talking about reading out loud, do you think you're going to be presenting the book in any other formats as well?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about doing it as an audio. So it's not an audio book at the moment. Sorry, guys, who kind of have Audible, or I'm sure other audio formats are available. What do you think? Is it a good idea? Should I do it as an audio
I think that would be incredible.
Yeah, maybe I should. So check out the YouTube channel, because I've read a few chapters of my book, and I was kind of thinking, maybe I should just read the lot and we can just upload it onto an audiobook site somewhere, or see if Stephen Fry's free and he can read it for me. So yeah, watch the space. Maybe an audiobook's on its way.
Are there any kind of themes or hidden nuggets that you'd like your readers to keep an eye out for when they're reading the book for the first time?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that a big kind of creative influence for me is music, and I've woven it into the book. So there are musical references, the odd kind of snippet of a lyric here and there. So watch out for those, they're well hidden. The main character, Bob, throughout the story, so there are 16 tracks that he plays, so 16 times where he plays music within the book. And it was just a brilliant way for me to get into the mood of the scene and how it might go. And in the book, I've said what song I think's playing. But I'd love to hear, if people out there have, kind of when they're reading the chapter go, oh yeah, there's a really good song that I think would really fit. Let me know. Let me know in the comments. DM me, whatever kind of method you have for getting in touch with me, and let me know what you think and what music you've chosen, because it's such an important part of my life and who I am. I'd love to be able to share that with other people and see what they chose. So yeah, there's music themed references throughout the book.
So when you set out writing the book, did you initially set out with the intention to publish it, or was it just something you really felt like you had to get down on paper?
Yeah, so no, definitely not. So I just started writing the story that was rattling around in my head, with the intention of just seeing if I could write it. And it was very personal to me. And actually, I didn't tell people I was writing for a long time because I was a bit embarrassed. Like, why is Alistair writing a book? What's he doing? But as I kind of got into it and I wrote more, and it's turned into something, so it's been professionally edited, it's turned into something that I'm super, super proud of. And when people have read it, I've just had really good feedback. So I feel like, well, I've gone as far as writing this thing. I should share it with the world. I should do it. So it's been an absolute whirlwind. So it's taken me 18 months start to finish, and just a really whirlwind time going from putting the first few words down to now I'm a published author and I've got a book that's out there that other people are reading and going, this is really cool. Thanks for writing it. So yeah, never intended to publish it. I'm so glad I have, and I'm so glad I can kind of share it with everybody. I love it.
Is there going to be a book 2?
Yes, so I'm already about a third of the way through book 2.
Oh, wow.
So I started writing book 2 whilst Artificial Earth was being professionally edited, because I just needed to keep going and needed a new project. So 12 chapters in, I'm just so kind of excited about developing some of the characters that I've kind of grown to know and love from book 1. So I'm hoping to release it this calendar year, which is super exciting. So yeah, get your hands on book 1, and book 2's coming. It's nearly there.
Are there any sneak peeks you can give us of the next book?
I don't know. Maybe I'll, yeah. So what can I tell you about book 2 that I might edit out later and regret telling you? So the working title is The Willow. So if you've read book 1, you might be able to kind of work out from a bit of it what that might be. So I'll just drop that bombshell in there. And I'm exploring a lot of character arcs for some of my characters, brilliant characters, but the character arcs are expanding in book 2. And it's just been so nice kind of exploring more about them and who they are as a character. So yeah, excited to see book 2 come out this year.
So AJ, what impact do you hope your book might have on readers, and how do you want your readers to walk away feeling after finishing BitBob?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, yeah, it's not just an adventure story. It's an emotional roller coaster as well. And you'll go through. There's parts that are funny. There's parts that are scary. There's parts that are sad as well. So yeah, I'd hope they would come away feeling like they'd been on not only a kind of an epic adventure, but a bit of an emotional adventure as well. And overall, it's just a really good, exciting adventure story. And that's what every book should be, right? It should be kind of leave you feeling like it was kind of exciting and thrilling. So yeah.
So we've heard so many incredible things about BitBob Artificial Earth. Where can we get a hold of a copy?
Yeah, that's quite an important point. We'll probably cover that bit off. So it's available on Amazon. So if you want the paperback, hardback, and ebook formats on Amazon, if you want it from a traditional bookstore, you can go into Waterstones or WH Smith's, that kind of thing. And it's available on a platform called Ingram Spark, so they can order you a copy in. And also very soon as well, I'm going to be releasing it on other ebook platforms, so Kobo, Apple, Nook, that kind of thing. So that's coming soon as well. So yeah, and if you want to kind of find out any more information or you want the links to buy, then just visit bitbob.net. So that's www.bitbob.net, and it'll kind of redirect you from there. You can join our socials on there, that kind of thing, join the mailing list. So yeah, check us out.
Yeah. And thank you so much, AJ, today for telling us all about your book, and thank you for joining us as well.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. Thanks, Florence. You've been kind of amazing. Yeah, thanks everybody. Until next time. Cheerio.